What's going on, guys? It's Mr. Salazar here. We're back with another video. I'm going to do a series here of tying jigs, and we'll go back and forth between twitching jigs and steelhead jigs. The first jig I'm going to show you guys is a marabou jig for steelhead. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a 1/8 ounce jig. And I poured these and dipped these all myself. They're on the Gamakatsu 90-degree Big River Jig Hooks. The one we're going to tie today is going to be a pink color. You'll see it better in the vise. But that's what we're going to be doing today. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, now that we're on the vise, what you're going to do is you're going to take your spool of line. This is the Veevus GO2 white 100 denier line. It's really strong. It's one of the best lines that I found. They make this in white or black. So if you're doing colored jigs, just have a couple Sharpies handy so that way you can color the line later on. But in this case, we're just going to keep the collar white. So I'm going to use white. All you do is when you start, you're going to want to wrap it close to the head on the jig, and then start wrapping your way down slowly. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take this excess line here, and you're going to cut that off. When you're doing this, it's very important that you don't cut off your main line that's connected to your spool, because if you do that, then all you're going to end up doing is end up getting frustrated and end up restarting. So what I'm doing now is building a base for the feathers to get stuck onto. So when you tie down the spine of the feather, it's going to sit on that thread that's there and help it attach securely. Because if it was just on the shank itself, then you could pull it out from underneath the threads. So now what we're going to do is I have a white feather and I have a peach colored feather that I've already selected and cut. So when you lay your feathers down, you want to lay them down to where they're cupped down. And what I did at the end here was I took the part of the feather that was on the spine closest to where I'm going to tie it down, is I just ripped those off. So that way that is easily accessible for when we tie it down right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide that on there. Make sure I get 1 or 2 good loops on there. Make sure it's centered and where I want it. And once I have it where I want it, all I'm going to do is just wrap that spine down the rest of the way. Okay, now that we have our peach feather on there, we're going to take our white feather and stack it right on top. So take your white feather, stack it on top, give it a couple wraps, so that way you can still adjust if you need to, where the spine is placed and everything. Adjust if you need to. I like to try to have everything centered on the shank itself. I mean, you could do it without having it centered on the shank, but that's just my preference. And then once you have it where you want it, go ahead and tie it down. And then from here, you can just take your thread all the way back up to the head. So now that it's at the head, we're going to take our 2 feathers on their spines. Try to find the spines. So here's the spine of the white one, and the spine of... So I'm going to grab the white one and pull that out of the way at the moment. Then I'll grab our peach one, find the spine, Okay, now that I have the spine on the peach one, you just want to stack those spines on top of each other. And you want to make sure they're both grabbed. And you can leave a little slack in there if you want to. I like to keep it taut if I can. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull these up. You see all these fibers right here on the feathers? What I try to do as I'm wrapping it around the shank is pull them all backwards. So that way they're going in the direction that I want them to as I'm wrapping. So all you're doing is grabbing those feathers, pulling them backwards, and having them stacked like this. It's going to give it kind of like an ombre color when it's done. So just pull them backwards. You can do a couple wraps if you need to, and then start pulling them backwards. If you do it that way, I recommend having something. Oh, my peach one came undone. And when you're doing this, it's common if you don't grab enough of the spine, how that just slipped out of there. It's common for that to happen. And if that happens, don't freak out. Just unwind and start again. Okay. So now, spine of the white one, which is right here. Spine of the peach one, which is right here. Stack those on top of each other. I'm going to grab it a little more this time than I did last time. Okay. And now, you just start that process again. Pulling the feather pieces back. And at the end, there are going to be some that wrap underneath, and that's okay. I'll show you how to get those out. Just pull them back. And then once you get to the end here where you feel like you can't really keep going anymore, try to keep it as tight as possible. And then what I like to do is I like to separate this if possible. And then take my thread and wrap around the top side of the extra. I'll go over the top 2 or 3 times, and then I'll go underneath 2 or 3 times. And then I'll go over the top one more time. And then I'll take my scissors and cut off the extra. And then I used the majority of those feathers, so I don't have much left over. If it was a bigger feather, you can keep the extras and use those for other marabou style jigs, for like perch or other things if you tie for those. And then what I'm going to take now, before I do the whip finish, is I have a shank for a spinner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. And go through the feathers here and try to pull out the ones that got stuck. You'll feel if there's any resistance, if there's any that got stuck. So So from the front of the jig, it looks like this. And I'm just going around, make sure I try to get any looped feathers out of there. Some people do this with a brush at the end, which you can. I've never done it that way, and I just worry that it is gonna grab some of those feathers and pull them off. So now that we've gone through that, what I'll do is I'll take all these feather particles and I'll lay them backwards. So lay them back. So that way there's no chance of them getting stuck whenever I do my finishing touch here. Okay, so I'm going to take my string, I'm going to build up a bit of a collar here and try to tie those ends in as best as I can. Just going to do a little collar, and like I said, I'm going to keep this collar white, so for me personally, it's not that big of a deal. If you think the collar makes a difference, you can go ahead and take a Sharpie right here, color this line in, and it'll change the final look only on the collar itself. And then I'm going to do a whip finish here. Go around 3 to 5 times is what I usually do. Pull that tight. And then I like to do it twice. Just a personal thing. Okay, now that I have that done, just make sure that's done tight, and then cut it as close as possible to the collar. So now what you have here is a tied marabou jig. And what I'll end up doing with this, I'll probably do it right now, honestly. I'm going to flip this around in the vise real quick. What I'll end up doing is I'll pull all these fibers back, and then I'll take my scissors, because I don't want it to be too big. This is a 1/8 ounce jig. I don't want it to be too big, and I'll go maybe a finger length past the point of the hook right here, so the end of the hook, and I'll just start cutting these. Does it have to be uniform? No, or the fish don't care if it's uniform. It's more of a personal thing. Give it a little haircut. Okay. Yes, that changed the look of the jig overall, but it's going to make it a little bit smaller profile for those days where the fish are finicky and they don't want the big profiles. And I'll tie some and leave them as big as they were, and then I'll tie some, cut them down like I just did. And then what you're left with is a jig that, from our angle, has this peach and white intermixed all the way around. In spots, the white is more prominent. In spots, the peach is more prominent. And that's just how it laid down as it was tying. And there you have it. Finished jig. And then I'm just going to throw that in the jig box, call it good to go. Alright, and there you have it. That's how I tie my marabou jigs most of the time. If you want to change the collar of it and not build it up with the line, you can tie on a piece of large chenille or small chenille, whichever type of chenille you want to use, and build that collar up that way. And what that does is it kind of conceals the line that you use. So if you weren't a fan of the color of the line that you use, or you didn't have any Sharpies or anything to color it up, you would mask that with the chenille itself. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, go ahead and subscribe. If you have any questions, leave that down in the comment section. Like I said, we're going to do a series of these. So I'm going to have multiple steelhead jig styles. I'm going to do some twitching jigs. And eventually later on, I might show you guys how I pour them and the molds that I use and what hooks that I use before they're poured, and show you that whole process. And if you'd like to see that, let me know.